Gliding or soaring is a sport of motorless flight, and we do this by using rising air currents, either generated by wind or generated by the heating of the ground by the sun. The gliders soar the way the birds soar. You find rising air and try to stay in it. The birds can do it and they can flap when things get tough, so they have an edge on most of the gliders. We use mathematics in gliding in the flight planning, in laying out the course, making the adjustments for the compass, and the time, rate, and distance calculations. We use it in meteorology in making estimates of the change of temperature with altitude. We use it in the performance estimation of the gliders. The four elements of soaring are sportive soaring, the aerodynamics, the design sailplanes, the weather, meteorology for soaring, and finally flight planning and navigation and the use of maps. In the area around here, we typically use convective soaring, thermal soaring. Thermals are shaped something like an ice cream cone. They're narrow at the bottom, they widen as they go up. They widen because of the entrained air, and you imagine the vanilla ice cream cone as the cumulus cloud capping the top of the thermal. The sun heats the ground unevenly. The thermals are narrow updrafts, columns of air moving up, so it's possible to climb in the updrafts, fly through the subsiding air, find another updraft, and continue on for many miles. I've flown more than 500 kilometers this way. If you fly between thermals and you fly too slowly, you won't get anywhere. If you fly too fast, you will run yourself into the ground because the sinking speed depends on forward speed. Generally, thermals are 400-foot radius, 500-foot radius. If you make too big a turn, you will be outside of it. You'll just get the edges. If you want to get the best lift, you come toward the core. And to get toward the core, you have to bring the turn radius down to 300 feet or 200 feet. And to do that, you have to increase the bank and the airspeed accordingly and pull the glider around in the turn. A glider is controlled in flight the same way as a powered airplane, with the exception of the throttle. The ailerons provide the roll, the elevator provides the speed control, air brakes provide for rapid descent, and the rudder provides for yaw control about the vertical axis. The glide ratio of a glider is one of the principal performance measures. It tells you how much altitude you give up for every foot forward. And you can see a glide ratio of 50, 1 mile loss of altitude, say 5,200 feet, you can fly 50 miles. That's a long way. Well, algebra is used in the calculation of the weight and balance of the airplane. There's sort of the seesaw principle. The long arm, small weight balances a shorter arm with a larger weight. And if you change the equipment, then you have to do the weight and balance over again. So algebra is essential. Well, the pilot has to understand the structure of the atmosphere. And as you go up in altitude from the surface of the Earth, the pressure and temperature drop. So you need to understand these things and be able to predict what the strength of the day is, where the cloud bases will be, and what the winds aloft are, so you can plan your day accordingly. The sun is continually moving in its arc across the sky. By the time it gets low in the afternoon at 4 or 5 o'clock, the heating is beginning to diminish, the thermals are beginning to die out, and the chances of getting any great distance after 4 or 5 o'clock begins to diminish. So you've got to make time during the shank of the day. For local flying, it always pays to have a current map in the cockpit. The navigation and flight planning is very important because if you don't pay attention to it, you'll get lost and you'll end up in a place that you might not want to be. So it's important to do the flight planning and execute it carefully. The flight planning and the monitoring of your flight as you go along requires just a little bit of calculation. Distance equals velocity times time is an important equation, and you carry it in your head. The velocity is the distance divided by the time, so you want to use it sort of backwards and see, are you making your pre-flight plan, making it good? Are you falling behind? On a long flight, you have a timeline that tells you where you have to be every 10 minutes. And you look at this because you're racing with the sun. You only have a certain number of hours in the day that the thermals are strong. And if you fall behind your timeline, you learn that you should either turn around or call your crew to come and get you, or else you see you're going to make it. But you must be doing these calculations, and today with GPS it's much easier. And when you come down to analyzing the performance of the gliders, it's a combination of geometry and algebra. The heart of a sailplane's performance is the polar plot. The polar plot is either a calculated or measured chart of the sinking speed plotted against the forward speed. And this completely describes the glider performance. The polar allows you to calculate the best speed to fly. It allows you to calculate turning performance, and that lets you instantaneously determine the best speed to fly while you're flying between thermals. Now, your flying depends on the wind. Clearly, if you've got a very strong headwind, you're not going to make much progress, and you should fly faster. I mean, if you're flying at 40 miles an hour in a 40-mile-an-hour headwind, you're making zero progress over the ground. So this is a little bit of algebra right there. I was a model builder when I was a boy, and I built model gliders, powered model airplanes and model gliders. And when I got to college, there was a glider club, and I had my first glider ride in 1950, and I never stopped. I loved it. I've been to 31,500 feet over Pikes Peak in a glider. It was great. It was just a feeling of being decoupled from the earth, and I rolled the glider over on the side and looked down and rolled it back because I wanted that connection with the earth again. It was really quite alien, silently sitting at 31,000 feet, no sense of motion, and looking out what looked like the end of the world.